Hello. If you go into hospital, then you will have something called a mental health risk assessment. I've been into mental hospital a couple of times. I wouldn't recommend it. But if you are there, then they'll give you something probably at some point called a mental health risk assessment. If you go on the internet, there's kind of nothing really about it. There's loads of shit about mental health and social care risk and assessing that. And risk assessments just generally exist as a kind of like a generic thing that they do in businesses and stuff like that. So this video is just going to be brief, hopefully, and it's going to explain what a mental health risk assessment is, so that if you're on the internet and you've been told that you're going to get a risk assessment, or you've received one and you're looking through it, you've got a resource which is maybe slightly better than some of the others which are on the internet that you can have a quick look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a risk assessment document that I got sent a little while ago. So here is, so I got this emailed to me by a social worker who worked for the NHS. I was at a private hospital in the UK. They run hospitals. There's a company called Cygnet that run a lot of private mental hospitals on behalf of the NHS, but they have NHS staff who work there too. This lady was a discharge coordinator, so she works getting people out of hospitals, and she's emailed me through a copy of a risk assessment that they did for me. It was password protected, so Google didn't like it, and you had to join something else called Egress, which is like an NHS weird platform for sharing confidential documents, apparently, and not viruses, I'm hoping. Anyway, this is what a risk assessment looks like. Okay, so it's a document, it's got a few pages, and when they say they're going to do a risk assessment, what they'll do is they'll complete one of these documents. You can sort of see so there's a few pages. It starts out at the top with a kind of client and family view bit, which is sort of like what's going on at the moment and where you're at the moment and how you're doing at present. And then it's got harm to self, harm from others, risk to others, risk of accidents, other risk behaviours. And all of this stuff is comprised of sort of historical things. So this other risk behaviours, risk of accidents, this is the risk assessment, and all this will be made up of notes. So if you've been in contact with social care services at the NHS or your local authority or mental health services before, then what they'll do is they'll go through, as you can see on this one, what they've done is, you can see it starts off, it's got notes about me from July 2012, 2018, then it's got May 2019, then it's got weirdly one from 2021, which is just weird because it's not in the right order. What the social worker, I believe, or maybe the consultant who's filled this out, was supposed to have done is selected details from each of the different bits. So like there'll be a historical set of notes, and if there's like risk to others, if you've had incidents where you've been a risk to other people for whatever reason, or you've been a risk to yourself for whatever reason, and then what they're supposed to do is read through all of those notes and cherry pick the details and say, in 2005, it was a risk to himself or herself for whatever reason, and then put it in there. But what this person's done is just copy and pasted all the details from some case notes and put them in there, which kind of makes it look like there's nothing missing. But I don't know if these are all the case notes, but normally that's what they'll do anyway. So the document, there'll just be a section, sort of three bits. The first bit is sort of, first bit sort of like what's happening now, how are you doing at the moment. Then there's like a historical section with bits of the risks that presented over time from the different notes from pretty much like mental health and social care notes. And then at the end, they do a summary which says what's happening now. So on the basis, it's kind of like what's happened, what's going on at the moment, what's happened historically, and what do we think in summary based on what's happening at the moment and what's happened historically we should do now. And that's what I'm going to show you at the end of the document, and that's what you can see in this bit. For some reason, the one that came through egress is like all blurry. I don't really know why that is. So I'll read you the first bit of mine if you want to have a little nose through. So it's got my phone number. I was homeless when I was in hospital. It's got my NHS number, my date of birth. I was 35 and I am a male. I always have been. I didn't have a GP at the time, and my consultant hasn't put his details in for whatever reason. Haven't got any children, it says there. And I was under a cluster of psychotic crisis from July 2020. That was the last time I was detained under section. I was informally admitted at this time, which is a bit different from being sectioned. And there's a social worker there called Tom Wood, who is the guy who supposedly has completed this. He's a social worker who works with that lady, Fiona, who was the one who emailed it to me, who I think left the business just after she did. So the current and the client and family view, this bit, says that Brodie does not believe he's currently at any increased risk of harm to self or others. He has clear and fixed views about a conspiracy about abuse he's suffered. These can influence his relationship with the arrangement services and people around him, and he can come into conflicts. Despite this conflict, he describes himself as resolutely pacifist and peaceful person, and that will focus on negotiating and problem solving. And then it's got the next bit, further details. I'll put myself on the left hand side and then you'll be able to read that bit. Following info is received from Dr. Ochijeli regarding your admission and considerations around capacity. Brodie is an informal patient on Sycamore Ward. He has a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, delusional disorder. He currently presents with persecutory delusions of a conspiratorial nature involving institutions. These are encapsulated in time and related to his experience of previous acute episodes of illness and contact with services. This usually has very little impact on his current functioning, so the reason for this admission has been for his safety and to access social care around which his continued management in this community can be structured. He's routinely been assessed several times in one-to-one sessions and at the multidisciplinary team ward rounds. These have included assessments for various capacities, such as for decisions about admission, treatment and social care. Brodie's been found to have capacity for these decisions and, as assessed, in time and within the relevant scope of the decisions to be made. His insight about the extent of his mental disorder is limited and may inform decisions potentially deemed unwise, for example, refusal of maintenance treatment with antipsychotics for a relapsing disorder on the grounds that he's currently not having an acute episode. He's currently prescribed procyclidine for side effects, dietary supplements and lorazepam PRN. Of course, there is a potential risk of relapse into an acute episode of illness in the future, with likely implications for varying capacities as may be indicated. However, Brodie understands his current social care needs, the various options available to him and their consequences. He's able to retain this information, weigh those consequences and communicate his decision consistently and clearly. Within this assessment, I've considered your capacity to make decisions. So it sort of goes, I don't know why, from like the third person to then first person. So he's talking about it as if it's somebody else, then he's talking about it as if he's talking to me. And this is the consultant, this Ochijeli guy, I think. Within this assessment, I've considered your capacity to make decisions around care and support and around accommodation. It is clear that on many levels you can understand, retain and communicate information in relation to these decisions. I feel that evidence of all of these was clearly shown in the contact we've had during this assessment and corroborated by ward-based colleagues. You showed good memory, good awareness of your needs and awareness of complicated elements of housing and tenancies. You do have a different way of describing your mental health needs, but you do not completely deny any problem and you have consented to an informal admission. The ward have clearly taken a nuanced approach, considering you are making unwise rather than incapacitous decisions on treatment decisions. It's important for us to consider carefully the influence of your beliefs around corruption, abuse and conspiracy you have on weighing up your decisions around your care and accommodation and managing risk. On the one hand, they clearly influence your willingness to accept services in Devon and your willingness to work to address the issues with your previous landlord. The beliefs have clearly been an element in your living rough and seeking out accommodation options around the country in the last year or so. Beliefs have not been consistently limited to Devon, though may have fluctuated or been something that you are at times more able to contain. On the other hand, all acceptable and reasonable options are not ruled out and you remain open to support. I note, for example, that you felt you had no other choice despite your fears of Devon. You did apply for housing in the Teignbridge area. I note that you feel it would be beneficial to live near your brother or a friend. I note that you have good awareness of laws and expectations relating to tenancies and homeless applications. Your beliefs of conspiracy are at times, in my view, limiting your options, but not completely ruling out potential reasonable ones. They appear to be fixed beliefs with no expectation of change or treatment. You, for clarity, it feels proportionate to conclude that you have capacity to make decisions around care or accommodation. I'm hopeful that by accommodating your beliefs about corruption, offering support in a way that you can accept it, we can avoid the cycle of homelessness and admission, help you to make decisions for yourself. I'm therefore concluding that while your ability is impaired by these beliefs, you can be supported and you have capacity to make the decisions for yourself. Capacity is time and decision specific. It may be at other times when these beliefs could become stronger and more influential, as has been noted in the past, and when specific decisions become a focus, different conclusion might be reached around your capacity. It may also be that if relevant risk is evident at these times, that consideration of the use of Mental Health Act might be appropriate to ensure appropriate care and treatments provided to you. So that's kind of like the current first bit that sort of says, yeah, how things are doing. Then you've got this bit, harm to self. It's got some stuff from 2021, then 2019, and then it goes back to 2000. It's sort of not really an audit. Somebody's just copied and pasted a load of notes rather than sort of what they're supposed to do is read the notes, go through them, and then pick out the contextually relevant bits that might, reference things like risks to others from those notes, not just copy and paste the notes in. But if all they've got is those notes, then copying and pasting them in isn't, all they're going to do is take the information out of there and put it into a different context anyway. So it's kind of a waste of time, you might argue. But probably the document's not meant to look like this. So yeah, it just goes through all the risks. So it says like what you're doing at the moment, goes through all the risks from your kind of historical narrative, and then you get a summary at the end. So this one said, Brodie has a strong belief system that's not shared by others and brings him into conflict at times with institutions and services that would otherwise be able to help him function. Does not appear to be a way to change this, though it does fluctuate in terms of intensity and impact on his decision making. At times he's found a way to live with the conspiracy and corruption he sees around him and focus on his day-to-day living and those things which work for him. For example, he appears to be able to work day-to-day with the ward staff on community and mental health staff despite expressing views about organisational corruption and serious levels of abuse. Brodie's belief system is at the root of all the risks identified in this assessment. Fortunately, he does not show any strong inclination to act on the desperation and frustration he feels either in harming himself or harming others. The main risk appears to come from him not always being able to find a way to work constructively with services who might be able to assist him, thus resulting in him not finding a way to access resources that he may otherwise be entitled to, for example, housing. There is also a risk in his escalation of conflict through means such as posting interactions and allegations on social media. But that, or maybe there's a bit more that might be. Brodie has a strong sense of how he wants to manage his mental health. This isn't fully in line with what mental health professionals would recommend, and so, for example, during recent admission to Sycamore Ward, there was agreement to work with him without medication, as this was felt more likely to achieve long-term engagement. Through working constructively, it appears he's open to some regular mental health contact, some access to medication, and a focus on social and functional rehabilitation. During this admission, he's engaged with social care assessment and support to explore supported housing options. He's indicated that he'd like community mental health treatment, follow-up on discharge, and some regular social care support 3 days a week or so to start work on issues such as money management, benefit maximisation, and other stuff. I never said I wanted help with money management or benefit maximisation. I said I wanted a psychologist to speak to on a regular basis. I did say I wanted supported accommodation. Sometimes you might find stuff in these documents that isn't completely accurate, and that's good to look at. I would recommend that those working with you need to be supported and accept and understand that particular challenges you face given the corruption, abuse and conspiracy that you describe. This does not need to be specialist service, but perhaps it is challenging to expect mainstream services to be fully understanding of this without additional longitudinal support. Alongside these plans, there will need to be a contingency plan to monitor and address any increase in risk that might warrant more formal intervention, for example, support decision making under the Mental Capacity Act or to protect from harm under the Mental Health Act. It's been noted by Dr. Otrajadi's Sycamore Ward in November 2021 that Brodie's delusions are aggravated by restrictive care and resistant to treatment. So when proportionality is considered, there is no expected benefit from enforcing medication. So, if you have a risk assessment, your social worker might email it to you, maybe they won't, but that's what one looks like. So if you have a risk assessment in hospital and you try and Google it, you go, what the bloody hell is all of this? There's nothing really, I don't really know what this is all about. And you won't really know if they've done it right or wrong. Hopefully now you've watched some bellend called Brodie on the internet talking about a risk assessment. Now you know what it is. Have a great day.